Welcome to this seminar. Nice to see everyone. Delighted to have Lala Maradova, who, as you can see from the slide, is an associate professor in political psychology at Southampton University. No need for me to give the title because you can see it on the screen there. So I'm just going to say, Lala, over to you. We'll have a talk for about half an hour and then questions afterwards. Thank you very much.
Okay. Can you hear me well?
We can.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much, Ben, for having me. Thanks everyone for attending it. So just first of all, I would like to tell you that I'm not a dating expert or a gender scholar. So up to now, I haven't worked on these topics. My interest comes from my growing interest in everyday politics in general. I am increasingly interested in whether people talk about politics in everyday life, like other social contexts, on dates, or at the gym, at workplace, and so on. And also, this project is a result of ongoing conversations with my girlfriends. So that's why I am really grateful to my girlfriends, because that came out as part of our conversation. So my substantive research, doesn't work. Has been on citizen competence. For example, in this recent work, I bridged deliberative democracy and democracy theory, and more specifically deliberative democracy and political psychology. And I look into the question of whether it's possible to motivate individuals to arrive at better political decisions. And one of the arguments I make is that instead of persuasion, we should focusing on what I call reflective political thinking, which is like more other regarding political decision making. And I argue that situational empathy for the other side can facilitate and has a democratic potential to motivate more reflection in people's political judgments. And then I test my theory, the help of 6 studies, some of them experimental, other more qualitative, and so on. So that's what I have been doing up to now. So this project is on dating is new for me. But when I asked Alberto Lopez, is a very good friend from VU Amsterdam to collaborate with me on this project. He has contributed with his unique insights and innovative thoughts, so has been really good collaboration for the time being. Okay, so I love you so much, said Virginia to Devon, just before rejecting him at the altar. In season 8 of Love is Blind, I'm not sure if someone has seen it. I have seen all of the seasons. And then later, Virginia said that her rejection of Devon was because they had such irreconcilable political differences. And she felt very strongly about LGBTQI plus rights, and she believed that women had right to abortion, and Devon didn't share these thoughts. So if you haven't seen Love is Blind, it's a Netflix reality show where people, without seeing each other, they come together in so-called pods and they talk about issues, and then they create this emotional connection. And then at the end, if they agree, they are presented with a kind of a wedding, and then they can either reject or agree. And Virginia wasn't the only one in this season who rejected their would-be husband on political matters. Sarah did the same. So basically, it was the first time in the history of the show that the politics was important for women's romantic choices. As I'm going to show you in this project, it's not only reality show, it's not only because it's a popular culture, but it's also happening in the real world. Okay, so this is a book project. It's a part of Cambridge Elements in Gender and Politics, and it's called Divided Hearts, Politics, Gender, and Contemporary Dating. Our main argument here is that contemporary dating is a powerful engine of gender-based polarization that we are currently experiencing. So it's not only being shaped by it, it actually contributes to it and exacerbates the existing gender-based polarization. And then we have the sub-arguments where we argue that because, and I will tell you more in the next slide, increasingly men and women diverge in their political views and behaviors, but in addition to that, there's also a great divide in men and women's dating and relationship expectations, as well as experiences and intentions. So together, these two types of broadly defined divergences contribute to men and women feeling increasingly frustrated with contemporary dating, which also spills over into, at the macro level, into gender-based political polarization. So we have so much in this book, but I'm going to just give you some glimpse. Feel free to ask me questions at the end. So we know that there have been some brilliant studies done. We know that women hold more progressive egalitarian attitudes than men across multiple democracies. And these differences especially stark in modern sexism, so attitudes towards gender equality, especially as among men. So that there's a systematic gender differences, with men being less supportive of progressive policies, which has an objective to promote gender equality. So online spaces and extremist political rhetoric also amplify the divide and make it starker and more visible. We argue that it's also coupled with the divergence in men and women's dating experiences, intentions, and dating goal achievement. So we argue that even though historically men and women's dating intentions may not have changed, the current contemporary dating and all these digital platforms make these differences starker and more visible. Okay, and then in one of the part of the book, we also justify why we think dating is an important social context and is not similar to like friendship circles or work colleagues and so on, because decisions about who to pursue and reject carry direct and personal consequences, especially for women, because it's also about personal autonomy. It's about education of kids. It's about career choices and so on. So dating functions as both a microcosm of societal differences, we argue, and an arena where differences between men and women are negotiated, reinforced, and made visible. And then we elaborate this argument a bit further by saying that because these dating intentions, which we also find empirically, that men searching more, increasing the sexual partners, while women are seeking more stable relationship, and being so visible, especially in dating apps, have been creating frustration, as it is repeated frustration with unmet expectations can foster resentment, distrust, and negative stereotyping. And the second is evolving norms and scripts around relationship building, and also specifically dating scripts, right? So we can see it in social media, for example, their content, what they call content designers or influencers, the increasing number of content being produced about who needs to pay for a date, and who needs to provide emotional warmth, etc., emotional support to the date. So these dating scripts are being changed, and this has created ambiguities and uncertainties, which anecdotally from our qualitative and qualitative data and also observation from real world dating have given us some idea, the conjecture this could be also spilling to increasing a degree of frustration among men and women. And of course, as I said, online aspect of dating makes these divides more salient. Okay, so as a result, let me just clarify one thing. So this book is about heterosexual dating. So we don't either theoretical and empirical, we don't discuss non-heteronormal, heteronormative dating. So we argue that heterosexual men encounter a growing number of women advocating for feminism, gender equality, while heterosexual women encounter sexist attitudes from men in dating contexts. And women increasingly reject men who hold sexist views on gender equality, and as a result, men become more frustrated with the gender equality that gave rise to the sexual and romantic emancipation of women. Then it has emotional tools. So dating interactions foster frustration and resentment among both men and women. Okay, so how do we test our theoretical expectations? We fielded a couple of surveys. I'm going to only focus on study 2 because that gives more direct empirical evidence for our ideas. In study 2, we recruited around 1,300 UK singles in February 2025 via Prolific. And it was a survey, and we embedded 3 experiments in this survey. One was a priming experiment, and I will tell you more when there's a special slide for it. So basically to see how dating influences political attitudes, and then we had a question wording experiment, and then we had a scenario experiment. And we also had an open-ended question, and the responses, like short essays or responses that respondents wrote, were analyzed quantitatively by applying. I'll tell you more about it. So LLM, and we just got some patterns out of these qualitative responses, more specifically about the causal mechanisms, about which we had some conjectures. Okay, so how is the analytical strategy? So we have 6 or 7, we have 7 chapters, short chapters in this book. In chapters 4, 5, and 6, we look at how contemporary dating are contributed in gender-based political polarization, while in chapter 2 just gives descriptive evidence for the existence of gender-based political polarization, and then chapter 3 shows empirically gendered nature of dating divide. And again, I'm just going to give you some glimpse from this project. First of all, are there mismatches? So we find that there are political mismatches. So they're similar with the current literature. So there is a wide divergence in women and men's political attitudes on a set of political issues. But here I'm going to present you specifically about dating divide. So we asked them several questions. One of the things that we captured is a relational nostalgia. So the idea that a dating and relationship building and the dynamics of relationship building used to be much better in the past. We'll conceptualize it not as something that you experienced in the past, but could be just imaginative. So it has this imaginative aspect to it as well. So we have a mean nostalgia index here by age group, and you see that women report across all age groups, and especially among young people, they report experiencing higher degree of what we call relational nostalgia. And then here we show which aspects of dating for men and women have become more difficult. And you can see that there are gender differences here as well. Women increasingly find it difficult to find attraction. They say finding shared values and mutual understanding. And for men, it only on a qualitative conversations, they report slightly more challenges. Okay, this part came as a surprise because, to be completely honest, we expected that there would be some degree of gender congruent norms in the society, but we didn't think that that would be so stark. So here we wanted to capture whether men and women still hold gender congruent ideas about dating scripts. So who needs to take different roles in organizing dates and paying for dates, providing emotional openness and warmth and so on. So here you see that the green is reported by men, and this column reported by women. So I mean, it's incredible. 85% of women still report, even though we have become more progressive, but we report 85% report that they prefer men to take charge during dates, and then they also prefer themselves providing warmth. And the similar, a bit less, is being witty during dates. And then we thought maybe it depends on women's self-identification with feminism. Maybe stronger feminists would prefer, so would hold more gender incongruent preferences about dating. But of course, this number decreases, but still we have almost 80% of, it's 78%, I think 78 to 79% of women who strongly self-identify with feminism, irrespective of the fact that they hold more progressive attitudes, they still prefer men to take charge on dates. Okay, so this one is probably one of the most surprising findings. So we embedded one experiment, one question wording experiment in the survey, where the objective was to see whether dating intention would make a difference for whether men and women would date members of some groups. In this case, we're interested in a far-right supporter. And we asked them the same question with one change. So we said, would you date members of the following groups? And in the end, we'll randomly assign them either to say for casual relationships, so for sex, or for serious, so long-term relationship. So as you can see across like everyone, so men and women, the preference for dating a far-right supporter is quite low. It's less than 50%. And then relationship intention, as a dating intention, doesn't make a difference for men, which is green, this line. It doesn't make a difference for them, but it makes a difference for women. So paradoxically, this was counter to what we expected. When it comes to dating with an intention for a long-term relationship, women are twice as likely to say they would date a far-right supporter, more than twice actually. This effect is huge. So you see from casual to long-term. They're more likely to consider a far-right supporter if it's for a long-term relationship. We have some conjectures why this could be. So just briefly, first, we think that maybe because a far-right supporter might be associated with more traditional values like family, children, and so on. And since there's a dating mismatch in the market, the dating market, it's increasing number of men seeking more casual relationship as opposed to women seeking more serious relationship, then this could be associated for like women lowering their standards and thinking that maybe these men are more traditional in their preferences. Maybe they would want family and children and so on. A second conjecture was that maybe in more progressive households, we might be thinking, I can change him, right? I can make him realize that, you know, he's wrong. Okay, so the second step here is to see, to provide a causal evidence for the question of whether dating aggravate the gender gaps. We had a priming experiment. So the question was whether cueing singles with dating questions influenced their political beliefs and attitudes. What we did, we randomized the order of question blocks, and half of the subjects read first questions about dating and dating challenges. That was our treatment. And then they responded questions about gender specific policy support, their voting intention, support for gender policies, feminist identity, and so on. And the half of the subjects first responded questions about their political attitudes, and then questions about dating challenges. Okay, so we have several results, and for the sake of the time, I'm just going to present the biggest one. And this is probably the biggest, the greatest empirical finding that we had, which is also the saddest one. So here is basically simple mean feminist identity. This is the question that we're taking from existing literature, and before and then after the priming, the dating priming. So basically, the difference between two constitutes a treatment effect. So we see that dating prime decreases men's self-identification with feminism, and the effect is not only statistically significant, but it's also quite substantive. Okay, in the next chapter, we'll look at, with the help of scenario experiment, whether modern gender equality attitudes are at the root of these diverging mating choices. So we embedded a scenario experiment and looking at gender gaps in men and women's beliefs about feminism, whether it contributes to gender-based political polarization. In the scenario experiment, we described a hypothetical romantic date and asked respondents to imagine it as vividly as possible. So we had 3 experimental conditions: a sexist date, a feminist date, and then we had a control. So these were the texts that they read. So the same text, imagine you're on a date with someone very attractive, was constant across all conditions, with an exception of the last, this one. So this was different. So the date either expressed feminist views or sexist views, but we never actually used explicitly the words feminist or sexist. So I'll leave you to read it quickly. And then we captured their dating intentions by whether individuals are attracted to their date and whether they would go on another date with them. So here we're interested in heterosexual men and women's preferences. As we see here on the first dependent variable attracted to date, we see that a sexist, which is the color of orange, sexist date has a dampening effect, has a huge negative effect on heterosexual women's reporting whether they are attracted to their date or not. And when it comes to another date, the same thing, the pattern is similar. While feminist date would have expected to have a positive effect, but it has no effect. Sexist date makes heterosexual women's dating intention, well, it decreases their dating intentions with regards to that specific date. However, what we see here, even though a sexist date makes heterosexual men report that they would be less attracted to their date, this difference is very small with respect to a feminist date. So actually, going on a date with a feminist also has a negative effect on men's dating intentions. The same, similar we see on the second variable, which is so going on another date. So an attraction and another date. So in general, we see that both feminist and sexist date puts men off of their dates. Okay, so you can ask, maybe it's conditional upon political ideology. Maybe what we're seeing is that these effects are driven by conservative men. And I have really negative news for you, because you will see that it's not the case. Right. We see that, of course, this effect of a dampening effect of sexist date, which is this orange color, is greatest among progressive women. However, the effect is also there among conservative women, right? So both progressive and conservative women on average are deterred by sexist date. However, what we see here, that feminist date also has a negative effect on dating intentions of progressive men. Even though the difference, so the modern sexist has a greater negative effect among progressive men, and the effects of those two treatments don't differ among conservative men. And then we looked at also emotional tolls that going on a date with a sexist a person has for a woman. I'm sorry, these graphs are probably too small. So again, the orange color is for modern sexist treatment. We see that going on a date with a modern sexist makes a woman anxious, feeling depression and angrier. However, going on a gender equality conscious, I would say, or woman also has a negative effect for heterosexual men. Both sexist and feminist dates make men sadder and angrier for some reason. Okay, so then we looked at the qualitative responses, and they were like out of 1,300, 700 of respondents, they provided some qualitative responses to the question of why they're experiencing challenges in contemporary dating. So here's LLM classified themes that we find from data. So I can tell you more about the method behind, but you see that when the question of why dating is harder absent technology is the biggest for women and for men as well, but there are gender differences. And an interesting pattern is unrealistic expectations. Men think it's the second biggest issue. Well, again, there are gender differences here, and another thing is communication. And when we try to do some what is that? It's like trying to capture the emotions, the primary emotions, and dating difficulty responses. We see that a frustration is the emotion that respondents experienced or reported experiencing the most. And then we also tried to look into the attribution of blame. What is interesting here is, again, there are gender differences, how men and women think who is to blame for dating difficulties. However, probably most interesting is here. So while 12% of men blame women for dating difficulties, this number is 9.5% among women. And then we also tried to capture a causal mechanism of how does this problem operate? Is it isolation? Is it fear and distrust? Again, we see the expectation inflation is where we see the greatest systematic gender differences. So for men is one of the reasons why the contemporary dating is challenging is that women have high expectations. Okay, so just to wrap up, we argue and we find also empirical evidence for the argument that contemporary dating not only reflects gender-based political polarization, but also actively intensifies it. We also find empirical evidence for dating mismatches, and we also see that there's a high degree of emotional tolls of contemporary dating for men and women. This is the latest season of Love is Blind, and this week I have finished watching it, which also brought to the fore another aspect of this gender-based political polarization, because several women were participating in this experiment. They explicitly were expressing their desire not to have children, and as you could also see the dynamics of how men were trying to convince them that they should have children, while they have been trying to justify why they don't want to have children. So I think if anyone is interested from the audience, I would be really interested to kind of look at these dynamics across all 10 seasons, and try to capture the politics behind people's choices for romantic partners. And that's it. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Lala.
Okay.